When an unknown fighter from Russia enters the UFC and has a dominant performances immediately, one of the most common questions posed by commentators and wider fan base is, where did they find this guy? And how many of these guys are there? Well, in this video, I'll talk about 5 guys that if they were to be signed tomorrow by UFC, they'd be immediate contenders in their weight classes. Same as Movsar Yevloev, Magomed Ankalaev, Petr Yan, Alexander Volkov, and Umar Nurmagomedov already are. Emphasis is on the fighters that aren't signed by any of the big global promotions, Bellator, PFL, or One Championship, and have already hit their prime and proven that they can beat high-level opposition, not on young up-and-coming fighters that have potential to maybe do so in the future. With that in mind, let's start. First up, Magomed Rasul Gazanov is a 29-year-old middleweight with 20-2 record, riding a 15-fight win streak and current champion of 3rd best MMA promotion in the world, ACA. If you ask people that have followed his career where does he rank amongst worldwide middleweights, they'd say somewhere in between 2nd best outside of UFC, behind Johnny Eblen, and absolute best in the world. Pound for pound, #1 fighter in Russia, in my opinion, has cleared out his division in ACA and is now going in for seconds. If he magically appeared tomorrow in UFC, I would like his chances of becoming the champ as much as anybody else's. And like that, now comes the part when I talk about his most used techniques and tactics. He usually throws no more than 2 punches at the time, and often it's only 1. I find that to be the smart move since he can leave himself a bit exposed on odd occasion when he does throw more than 2 punches. Most he's been hurt during this 15-fight win streak was versus Artem Frolov in a situation like that, where he ended up in southpaw for a brief moment. Particularly likes throwing his straight right or right hook with his right leg coming forward. Off of it, he'll either drop down to his opponent's hips or weave to his right and throw a long left hook. He'll also throw jabs and front and leg kicks from range. Abdulmanap's school fighter is very good in clinch, attacking with knees and elbows. Rasul is also a good transitional fighter that'll strike at moments when the fight is going from wrestling to stand-up. Now it's time to talk about his wrestling. Here are some takedowns off of his left hand to start us off. An aspect of his wrestling I particularly like is his ankle control. Very good counter wrestling and wrestling from his knees as well. When he's got control of his opponent against the fence, he'll go for cross-side wrist control and strike with his free hand. Gazanov is also quite good at staying on top of his opponents as they are moving underneath him trying to free themselves. Not every takedown attempt of his is successful. He'll often predictably reach out for opponents' hips and put himself in a vulnerable position, though no one has made him pay yet. Next up, Islam Omarov, a 27-year-old 15-0 featherweight on a 4-fight finish streak from Dagestan, Russia. ACA's champion is a prototypical Dagestani wrestler that isn't looking to spend much time on his feet. He's quite capable of taking down his opponents in the open, but his best work is done against the fence. One thing that becomes clear quickly after you start watching him is that he's an orthodox fighter that prefers to shoot for his takedown attempts with his right leg forward. So a lot of his shots come after right side strikes. Once he gets his takedown, Islam will look to first control and elevate the legs. He has shown affinity for guillotines, but he doesn't put himself in worse position to try and get them. Even if he does end up in a worse spot, his scrambling ability is excellent and he finds a way to come back on top. Best showcase of that was his fight versus Jihad Yunusov. And he's the only fighter from this list that has a win over another member of the list. Albert Tumenov is a 32-year-old ex-UFC welterweight with a 23-5 record and an 8-fight win streak from Kabardino-Balkaria, Russia. Current ACA champion is undefeated since leaving UFC for financial reasons. He had a decent UFC run beating Alan Jouban and Lorenz Larkin and ending it with 2 losses to Gunnar Nelson and Leon Edwards. Big flaw that costed him those 2 fights was his takedown defense. That has since improved. If it didn't, there's no way he would be a champ of a Caucasian MMA promotion. He has a background in karate, army hand-to-hand combat and boxing, with boxing being easiest to spot in his current fighting style. Great striker that builds his offense off of reactions of his opponents to his jab. Albert will jab their head and body. If they try and parry those jabs, he'll go around with hooks. If they try to go backwards or slip the punch, he'll double up with non-committal jabs or jab feints, followed by a straight right. Left leg body kicks are his biggest kicking weapon. He'll throw them from both orthodox or southpaw, with them being the main weapon for him once he does switch to unconventional stance. That's most of his offense, enhanced by his splendid sense for rhythm and hand speed. One thing defensively that he does, and I can't say I like, is he'll pull back away from a punch with his hands low. Fedor Tumenov is a 27-year-old 13-2 featherweight and Albert Tumenov's cousin. Even though other fighters from this video are more accomplished, he might be the one I'd like to see in UFC the most because of his fighting style. It absolutely destroys the stereotype that all Caucasian fighters are boring wrestlers. Fedor first started as a boxer before switching to MMA, with his biggest accomplishment coming at 2014 IBA Youth World Boxing Championships, where he won gold. Other notable gold medalists from that tournament for 17 and 18-year-olds were Bektemir Melikuziev and Shakur Stevenson. Biggest names in his MMA win column that might be known by wider fan base are 2-time PFL tournament champion Lance Palmer and past his best ex-UFC fighter Diego Brandao. The 2 MMA losses he has were against elite prospects at the time, Timur Hizriev, current Bellator fighter, and aforementioned Islam Umarov. No shame in those. As you probably guessed, his hands are most dangerous part of his arsenal. Extremely fast and powerful, as it'll be evident in these highlights. One way he makes use of that hand speed is drawing out opponents' hands into a hand fight, leaving their head unprotected. He'll do this especially versus southpaws, with him controlling their lead hand and throwing his straight right being one of his go-tos. Boxers that transition to MMA can sometimes struggle with further distance that MMA bouts are fought at. Bebert has an interesting footwork quirk that helps him close that distance. He lets his rear leg follow forward as he punches, but it's not a classical step into southpaw or squared stance. He takes a slight step with his front leg, and as he's punching, his rear leg just follows the inertia of the body. Leg is kind of straight, and he lands a bit awkward sometimes. When the footage is slowed down, awkwardness of some of these steps is easier to spot. What makes it even more awkward is that his rear leg will follow as he's punching with his lead hand, hooking to the body in all likelihood. Blitzing left hook to the body being his trademark move, most often used on opponents circling to his left when they're near the fence. Less awkward variation is when he does it while punching with the same side hand. Here he lands 2 punches before his right leg even lands. Don't get me wrong, he can still continue to punch off it, it's just not a classic step that you'll see most fighters do. This type of stepping also displays his ability to flow from one punch into another in a combination. Last thing I'll mention is his use of uppercuts, either to catch ducking opponent or to keep their head straight up so he can catch them with a follow-up shot. And last but not least, Edward Vartanyan is 33-year-old lightweight with a 25-4 record that has been near the top of pound-for-pound lists of fighters UFC needs to sign for years now. He's currently riding an 8-fight win streak and coming off an ACA lightweight Grand Prix win, as well as a win over ex-UFC fighter Damir Ismagulov in a 4 ounces kickboxing match. Best win of his career came against Bellator lightweight Grand Prix finalist Alexander Shabli in an action-packed fight from 2016. That's how long he's been UFC ready. Big chunk of his offences build off of his jab. From 1-2s, double jab, with second going to the body or head, to feint that combo and going with straight right. Edward will often bring his right foot forward and a bit to the right with his straight right as a shift to the southpaw, from where he'll go for classic southpaw weapons of left straight and left body kick. He'll fight in southpaw from time to time even without the shift. Neat move that he uses is bringing his right foot forward after his straight right, but not to step on it, but to trip his opponent. He hit it on Ismagulov couple times. Credit to Ryan Wagner, who mentioned it on Dan Tom's podcast a few weeks ago. Go listen to it. Both are among best MMA analysts around. I'll post the link below. Any opportunity when he and his opponent crash into each other, he'll grab a collar tie and immediately throw some knees. Vartanyan is an all-around fighter that'll often try and take down his adversary. Once he gets on top, Edward rains down elbows on every opportunity they give him. If you want deeper breakdown of Edward Vartanyan's game, go and check out this great piece on thefightsite.com written by Ryan Wagner at RyanAwag MMA on Twitter. I'll post a link in the description. He's been trying to get signed and negotiating with UFC for about a year now, and latest news suggests it ain't happening since they only offered him Contender Series fight, which is laughable for a fighter of his caliber. He turned it down since he can make 50 times more money fighting in Russia and will most likely go back to fight in ACA. Now, it doesn't mean these are only ones that could be viable contenders tomorrow if signed by UFC. It's just that 5 guys featured in this vid are, I feel, as close to a guaranteed contenders as they come. I think their accomplishments and performances back up my claim. I'll end on a sour note. What are the chances these fighters get signed by UFC, you may ask? Slim. And why that is a topic for a future video.